The Guillotine Incident. Pierre Levegh, Le Mans, 1955. The grandstands were packed with more than 300,000 people, families, fans, and reporters, squeezed together all cheering as they watched the 24 hours of Le Mans unfold. Mercedes, Jaguar, and Ferrari machines roared down the straight, pushing to limits that the 30-year-old track could no longer handle. On the 35th lap, Hawthorne suddenly turned into the pit lane, slamming the brakes right in front of Lance Macklin. Macklin jerked his steering wheel left to avoid a collision, swerving directly into the path of Pierre Levegh, who was approaching at over 125 mph. All of this happened in just 3 seconds. The Mercedes 300 SLR struck the rear of the Austin Healey, launched into the air like a missile, and then inevitably crashed straight into the crowd that had been clapping for their favorite racers. The impact was so violent that the car became a blazing fireball. Its magnesium alloy body erupted in white flames. The heaviest components, the engine front suspension and radiator, were hurled nearly 110 yards like artillery shells, crushing dozens of people instantly. Yet the most horrifying of all was the hood. Razor sharp, torn loose and spinning like a giant circular saw, it flew into the grandstand, slicing through the air and decapitating spectators packed shoulder to shoulder like a massive guillotine. Within seconds, survivors stood up to find headless bodies lying beside them. Honestly, the scene was too grim to describe further. When the smoke cleared, at least 83 spectators were dead, with the dying scattered everywhere and hundreds more severely injured. Pierre Levegh was thrown from his car. His skull was crushed on impact and he died instantly. But the organizers refused to stop the race. They allowed it to continue, fearing that a panicked crowd might trample and kill even more people if the event was halted. The cars kept running while bodies lay across the track and fires still burned. The disaster shocked the world as the deadliest accident in motorsport history. Several European countries immediately banned racing until safety standards could be improved. No matter how passionate one is about speed, risking the lives of those cheering for you is a fatal mistake, one that could wipe out an entire crowd. Follow driving rules. Never lose focus or drive recklessly, because even a moment of carelessness can endanger the lives of everyone around you. Burned alive. Mid-race, on July 29, 1973, at the seaside Zandvoort circuit in the Netherlands. Roger Williamson, a 25-year-old British driver who had only just stepped into Formula One with the March 731, was on the 8th lap of the Dutch Grand Prix. The atmosphere was electric, spectators cheering under the blue sky. But at a high-speed corner near the Oost Tunnel, a section only 26 feet wide with a 12-degree camber, his tire suddenly failed, causing the car to flip upside down. Fuel burst from the tank, met sparks from metal scraping the asphalt, and erupted into 10-foot flames. Williamson was uninjured by the impact but was trapped beneath the overturned car, quickly swallowed by a sea of fire. His helmet slammed against the ground, his body battered against the frame, but the roll cage shuddered without collapsing. Flames spread into the cockpit, and acrid toxic smoke from burning rubber forced its way inside through a 5-centimeter gap. Williamson, still conscious after the rollover, struggled frantically in the confined space, reaching for the release lever, but the seat's 90-degree tilt trapped his arm and made escape impossible. Track marshals, poorly equipped and inadequately trained, could not flip the car upright. Meanwhile, David Purley, having witnessed his friend's crash, abandoned his race, pulled over, and sprinted across an active racetrack to save Williamson. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, charged directly into the flames, slammed his fists against the windscreen, and tried to lift the 200-pound chassis with his bare hands. The small extinguisher sputtered helplessly at the edges of the inferno. Purley waved desperately at other drivers, Jackie Stewart, Emerson, Fittipaldi, speeding past at 125 mph, but they mistook him for the driver of the crashed car. None of them stopped. The race continued. The fire reached the auxiliary fuel tank and ignited with a sharp burst. Williamson's screams weakened as carbon monoxide filled his lungs. The fire truck, half a mile away, rolled slowly down a service road, arriving 8 minutes later, by which time the flames had already burned themselves out, leaving only a charred, motionless shell of the car. Roger Williamson was the sole victim, killed not by the crash, but by smoke inhalation. Purley was later awarded the George Medal for the extraordinary courage he showed in his desperate attempt to save him. This tragedy pushed the sport to mandate fire-resistant gear for marshals and improve rescue training. I can't help wondering if Purley hadn't run out. Would any driver have realized that beneath that cloud of black smoke, a man was still alive and pleading for help? After all, only one person needed to stop one person willing to believe that a life mattered more than reaching the finish line for a miracle to happen. History has proven a brutal rule: every step forward in safety is paid for with the highest price: human life, the fatal weld. May 1st, 1994. The Williams FW16, bearing number 2, is leading the field at the San Marino Grand Prix. Ayrton Senna, the 3-time world champion, is on his 7th lap. All telemetry readings show normal operating conditions. As the FW16 charges into the Tamburello corner, the dashboard registers a speed of 192 mm. Aerodynamic pressure weighs heavily on the chassis. Earlier, the technical crew had welded a small diameter metal piece onto the steering column to bring the steering wheel closer to Senna as he requested. That weld was a fatal weak point. Under the relentless G-forces and violent vibration, metal fatigue reached its limit. Suddenly there's the sound of metal cracking. The weld snaps. The mechanical connection between the driver and the 2 front wheels is completely severed. The front wheels turn right from 0 to over 15 degrees in just 0.1 seconds, and the car loses all steering. Senna instinctively slams on the brakes. You might think he could stop in time, but at that speed it was impossible. The car immediately veers off the track. The Williams strikes the unprotected concrete wall at a shallow angle. The impact tears apart the right side pod and the nose cone. The suspension shatters. The right wheel detaches. The car skids across the gravel and comes to a stop. A high-angle camera shows Senna's head moving slightly to the left once. Millions hoped it was a sign of life, but it was only the final mechanical reflex of a nervous system shutting down. Tragically, the survival cell remained nearly intact. Senna did not suffer a single broken bone, but a sharp piece of the suspension pierced his helmet visor, penetrated his forehead, caused massive brain trauma, and severed the temporal artery. Blood began to fill the cockpit. When medical personnel extracted his motionless body from the wreck, Dr. Sid Watkins performed an emergency tracheotomy on the spot and called for a specialized medical helicopter. His heart stopped shortly after arriving at the hospital. His death permanently changed the face of Formula One circuits, were redesigned. The Hans device was introduced and safety standards became stricter than ever. And in your view, who bears the greatest responsibility? The team that welded the part for him, or the human hunger for victory itself? F1 crushed under the tractor. October 5th, 2014, Suzuka Circuit, Japan. Super Typhoon Fanfone was making landfall, turning the racetrack into a river. Jules Bianchi at the wheel of the Marussia MR03 was fighting through lap 43. Visibility had dropped to almost nothing. A dark, heavy atmosphere hung over the circuit. At the Dunlop curve, turn 7, Adrian Seudel lost control and crashed into the barrier. Double yellow flags were waved. A 6.5-ton recovery vehicle moved into the gravel trap to retrieve Seudel's car. At that very moment, Bianchi approached. His worn intermediate tires could no longer cope with the deepening water. Marussia's cable-operated braking system was incompatible with the fail-safe protocol, preventing him from shedding enough speed. The rear tires lost grip on a patch of water that matched exactly the position of the recovery vehicle. The nose of the Marussia plowed beneath the truck at 78 mph. The impact generated enormous rotational forces. Carbon fiber shattered. The roll hoop was sliced cleanly by the rigid steel undercarriage. Bianchi's helmet struck the solid counterweight of the crane. The kinetic energy was so great that it lifted the 6.5-ton vehicle off the ground. The F1 car came to an instant halt beneath the massive machine. The downward force crushed the skull like an object caught in a hydraulic press. Bianchi lost consciousness immediately. The result was diffuse axonal injury, widespread tearing of neural connections. What was startling is that while Bianchi lay motionless at the edge of life and death, right above him on the marshal post, a track worker was still waving a green flag, signaling that the track was safe. A gesture that felt like a cold, ironic twist of fate aimed at the young driver. Jules Bianchi passed away on July 17, 2015, after 9 months in a coma, becoming the first F1 driver to die in 20 years since Ayrton Senna. His death gave birth to the virtual safety car system and accelerated the adoption of the Halo cockpit protection. Formula One became safer, but the price paid was the smile of a young French talent. That is why under dangerous weather conditions like these, we must never travel at high speed. Safety, both our own and that of those around us, depends on it. Sometimes just a moment of carelessness can lead to consequences far beyond anything we can imagine.